CapeCast.
Here on Mystery Lane in Cataumet, serial killer Jane Toppan weaved a woeful tapestry of murderous mayhem, killing 7 members of the same family in one summer at the dawn of the 20th century.
It's been said that she killed over 30 people, and this is, 30 people, 7 of whom resided on the Cape that particular summer. And the other 23, everyone from her fiancé, who was about ready to get rid of her when she killed him, to her stepsister.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to CapeCast, the official webcast of the Cape Cod Times. Today we're at the Jonathan Bourne Public Library in Bourne Village, and we're hot on the trail of a serial murderer. Luckily, the events took place over 100 years ago, but they're still pretty scary. Diane, tell us a little bit about this person that we know as Jane Toppan.
Jane Toppan was also known as Jolly Jane. She was a nurse by profession, and she was also a serial killer. Unfortunately for her, she was found out one summer in 1901 when she literally killed almost an entire family in Cataumet.
That's serious business. Serious business. What was her methodology?
Being a nurse, it was very easy for her to disguise how she was killing people. She would give them morphine by injection, and most of her patients already had a previous condition, either a heart condition or something that would lead the authorities to think that they had died naturally.
How did she come to Cataumet, and what happened with this family?
She came to Cataumet with the Davis family, and when Mrs. Davis came down, she was waiting for her. She felt that Mrs. Davis needed to be put out of her misery.
And after Mrs. Davis, there were more members of the same family that unfortunately were treated by the nurse?
There were. The Davis and the Gibbs family were interrelated, and there were several small children. Luckily, she did not kill any children that we know of.
Diane showed us part of the extensive archive at the library about Jane Toppan. Apparently, this case has echoed through the years in this part of the Cape, and people still talk about her. Diane also told us about a very unpleasant Cataumet incident where Jane apparently showed some sort of sisterly affection. Scotch Cove in Cataumet, the site of another Jane Toppan special. According to Harold Schechter's book, Fatal, about the Toppin case, Jane and her foster sister Elizabeth carried a picnic basket down to Scotch Cove, where they spent several hours chatting merrily, snacking on cold corned beef and taffy, and basking in the glories of the ocean sky and weather. The following morning, Elizabeth did not respond when called down for breakfast. Ultimately, Jane did confess to the poisoning of her foster sister, saying she had slipped into bed beside the dying woman and saying, quote, "I held her in my arms and watched with delight as she gasped her life out."
She'd had a very unfortunate childhood. Quite frankly, I think her unfortunate childhood was that she may have been crazy to begin with and just kind of followed her through her life.
Jane Toppan was brought to trial here in Barnstable. The big problem? She was crazy. On June 23, 1902, Jane Toppan was put on trial in Barnstable for the murder of Mary Gibbs. She was found not guilty by reason of insanity. According to records from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, quote, "The medical testimony was direct and unequivocal to the effect that the prisoner suffered from a permanent and incurable form of insanity, and that she could never be at large or unconfined without danger to others. Upon the return of the verdict, the prisoner was duly committed to the Taunton Insane Hospital for the remainder of her natural life. She died at the hospital in 1938. So this is a big creepy deal down here by the canal in Buzzards Bay.
It actually is. The Historic Society does a tour once a year in August, and Jolly Jane's haunts are pointed out. They actually have somebody who plays Jolly Jane.
Diane, have you ever played Jolly Jane during that whole thing?
Actually, I did. I was not the most recent Jolly Jane, but I did play Jolly Jane about 12 years ago.
Well, see if you can channel a little Jolly Jane for me. Back 12 years ago, you're playing Jolly Jane. You've had a tough upbringing. You've got a big bottle of poison, and you've got some sort of issues you want to settle. If I could ask you, Jane, what made you do it, what would you say?
Well, now, that's a very good question. I think it's all related to my childhood. I think that people didn't understand me. They were they weren't very nice people. And particularly the man I was engaged to. He left me practically on the altar. And I was anticipating being a very, very wealthy woman. And he left me, and I was practically penniless. I had to go back to work. And you know, that Mrs. Gibbs was so nice. But she really did need to be helped into the next world.
Okay, I'm out of here.
CapeCast.